From WJHG, this is a Decision 2026 election update.
Well, welcome back to News Channel 7 Plus today. The votes are in. Floridians have decided after polls closed last night in the 2026 Florida primary. Joining us now is our Florida Capitol Bureau Chief, Matt Hoffmann.
Great to be here. Happy to be here. Good morning from, sunny Orlando, and hope everything is well in your neck of the woods.
Yes, it's been a great morning here so far. Now, Matt, I know you've had a long night in Orlando. How are you feeling this morning?
Yeah, long night, good night. You know, it's always a good sign. We said this on the air last night. When you can call the election night watch party early being relative, of course, for these things, that's always the good news, because we've seen some of these where it goes till midnight, 1, 2 a.m., and they're still counting votes, or there's issues. Of course, we have some infamous elections on that here in Florida. Last night, that was not the case. Results, by and large, were very obvious almost right away. By the 8 o'clock hour, we had things pretty much called. And so I think that's a testament to our democracy, frankly, a testament to how we count votes in Florida, and a testament to how quickly we can process things.
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw you check in with both Jessica Foster and Allison Baker throughout last night. Tell us a little bit about the atmosphere there. It was quite loud when we were listening in.
It was loud. It was chaotic. It was energetic. Just to set the scenes for you, I'll give you a little bit of an inside baseball look at things. Basically, they have the media, the press set up on like two risers, kind of like at a high school football game where one's higher than the other. There were probably, I'll say, 30 news crews there. That rivals, I've covered President Trump's rallies before when I used to work in Iowa. This rivals that same number of crews, the same number of folks there. It must have been at least 1,000 folks there last night. Obviously, everyone there thinks they've seen the next governor of Florida, not just the GOP nominee. And so everyone is excited. And again, it was one of those things where everybody got to come in, have the party, and leave at a reasonable hour, which I'm sure they were happy about.
Yeah, absolutely. And then being there and hearing from the GOP winner last night, Byron Donalds, tell us a little bit about what his message was.
Yeah, there's sort of two different messages here. First message is they need to rebuild or coalesce the Republican Party. That's because he did have some primary challengers, including the lieutenant governor, including the former House Speaker, including a businessman. And so now that he's won, he needs to get those votes on his side of the ledger for the general election. So the first thing that he said was, I received a call from the lieutenant governor, and I received a call from the former speaker, and I received a call from the businessman. He said he did not mention any call from the lieutenant governor, actually. So anyways, the bottom line is they need all those votes. And so he said, let's all come together as one Republican Party to win in November. That's message one. Message two, immediately turning from we won the primary election to an attack on former Congressman David Jolly, linking him to Dr. Fauci, linking him to these cultural issues of the day, and linking him, obviously, former Congressman Jolly has switched parties in order to run, and so, of course, Congressman Donalds hit him over the head for that. So you had first, let's build the same Republican Party, let's open the tent and get everybody in, and then let's focus on November.
Yeah, absolutely. So was this an expected win? Was this matching kind of some of those predictions that many have been seeing?
Yeah, I feel like this is a little bit like, when we fill out our March Madness brackets and everybody, you have some upsets in there to make it fun, and then you get through and it's all number one seeds in the Final Four, something like that. It was chalk pretty much across the board, a few upsets, but mostly what we expected. The prediction markets especially would have indicated that Congressman Donalds had like a 95% chance to win. We saw that come true. I mean, the AP was able to call the race at like 8:04, which is like 4 minutes after the polls closed, because it became so obvious at that time. Then if you switch to the Democratic side, same thing for David Jolly. His major competition was Val Demings, who had to drop out because of cancer. And so he didn't have a lot of organized opposition. And so he was able to steamroll too. I even saw earlier in the day yesterday, before the watch party, Congressman Jolly, former Congressman Jolly, was saying, I feel confident going into November. So he already had felt that before the votes were actually tallied up. So this is basically what we expected, with the exception of the U.S. Senate race on the Democrat side. We did see an upset there. Happy to talk about that whenever you'd like.
Yes, I do want to dive into that. But real quick, now, after this win, has Congressman Jolly, has he said any statement? Has there been any reaction since the votes were in?
Yeah, he addressed his watch party last night, and he went to the obvious that he is going to need a diverse coalition in order to win. His message is, if you are a disaffected Republican voter, maybe you are a Republican voter who is not fond of the president, vote for me. If you are an NPA voter, here in Florida, that's what they call them, but it's an independent voter. If you're an independent voter, vote for me. And if you're a Democrat, also vote for me. So they're trying to build this coalition because they have a huge hole to fill. There's and the number is growing, 1.5 million more Republicans than Democrats registered here in Florida. So if David Jolly has any chance to win, he is going to need to fill in that gap. And he's going to have to do that with some of these other voters. He's going to have to pick off Republican voters. And so that was his message off the top. He had a quote where he talked about the culture wars and how he wanted to end them, but not because it's a progressive ideology, but because he doesn't think we need to be talking about this stuff and that it's dividing us. So he pretty much, I saw a headline saying or suggesting he rejected socialism and the DSA right off the bat. I think that's pretty fair to say.
Yeah. And what has the response been from those that were in the running for this GOP position?
Yeah, I saw that Lieutenant Governor Collins put out a statement saying it was an honor in order to have run for office. I know one of his campaign advisors said that they were happy that he had outperformed the polls. He had an uphill climb. Whenever you're going against someone who has the president's endorsement, it's going to be tough. I did also see that Lieutenant Governor Collins announced Kevin Guthrie as his running mate. You may have seen that, you may know Mr. Guthrie. He is the emergency response guy for Florida. If there's ever a hurricane, you see him up there doing the briefing. He was announced as his running mate, and he had to resign, or he chose to resign, I suppose, his office in order to run with Lieutenant Governor Collins. And now, obviously, Lieutenant Governor Collins lost. So you have the emergency management director within a day announcing a lieutenant governor campaign and resigning. So that is certainly a reaction. I've seen a few other muted reactions. There's some suggestion that James Fishback's campaign, even though it only garnered about 10% of the vote, may kind of change the trajectory of politics a little bit, because he does have a lot of younger support. He is able to turn out young people to his rallies. Now, we saw that did not lead to any conversions for him at the polls, and let's wait to be seen how that may affect things going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, what were some of those big upsets? I am dying to know.
Okay, well, the big one, if you will, is we're talking Democratic U.S. Senate primary. The polls and the prediction markets would have told you that retired Colonel Alex Vindman was a leader in the clubhouse. You may know him too. If his name sounds familiar, he testified during the first impeachment of President Trump and the Russia scandal. He was one of the folks on the national security team. He had a huge money advantage. He had a lot of donors from outside Florida, probably because people recognize his name, and he's sort of gotten a cult following. He was running here in Florida. The polls and the prediction markets would have suggested that he was going to win. Professors thought he would win by and large. Well, that didn't happen. Instead, we have a DSA candidate, a candidate who says that she is a Democratic socialist, State Rep Angie Nixon, who won last night, and frankly won in a pretty handed margin. I think it was 55-44 around the time I went to bed. Obviously, these numbers could shift a little, but it was a definitive victory for her. And so it's interesting. Does that suggest Florida Democrats are moving more to the left, are moving more progressive? I don't know, but Vindman would have been the safer choice in terms of trying to win in November. But perhaps State Rep Nixon is the more exciting choice and the choice whose values more align with Democratic voters.
Yeah, and you touched on this a little bit just now, and I know this just happened last night, but has anyone kind of pointed to anything specific that would have led to Nixon over Vindman?
Yeah, I think a lot of that analysis is still coming in. But I think one thing we can say is perhaps folks underestimated how much name recognition State Rep Nixon had. You might recall she has done some, really principled protests, but that have drawn the ire of Republicans. She had a sit-in at the governor's office there at the state capitol. That drew a lot of media coverage. She had a protest on the state house floor where she had a bullhorn and she was removed. Obviously, both those got major media coverage, so perhaps that was underestimated. She's from Jacksonville, a major media market, so perhaps that has something to do with it. And maybe it's just that voters are fed up with the establishment. I know, Republican voters, not to mix our metaphors too much, rejected a few of President Trump's endorsements. So maybe this is Democratic voters saying, you know what, us too, we don't want establishment. We don't want the same old, same old. And so perhaps that's a message to politicians that, hey, voters really are fed up and they're not afraid to show it.
Yeah, absolutely. So my next question for you is, what now? What should voters be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I've always been someone who would tell voters, listen to the policies, not the bluster. It's increasingly difficult to do. Every ad on TV is an attack ad. Every ad on social media is the same, and it's a lot of mudslinging these days. But I think it really will come down to some of these policies. Number one, your wallet. You want things to be affordable. All campaigns that I've heard from this cycle have been talking about it. How are we going to make things more affordable? Then you got your Florida issue, specifically insurance. Insurance in Florida, insanely high. And then we've got new technology. What about flock cameras? I've seen that's not an ideological issue where everybody just comes down on their party. How do people feel about that? And then we have data centers, another huge problem or opportunity, depending, I guess, on how you look at it, in Florida. And how will the candidates go about regulating those? And some of these issues, like I said, they don't just fall along your traditional partisan lines. And so I think we will hear, if you pay attention closely enough, and hopefully we can distill some of this for you to make it easier, you will hear some policy differences. And I think it's always better to make your decisions based on that.
Yeah, and I think what you just said pairs really well with my next question, which is, what do you typically see the strategy change between now and the general election from these candidates?
Yeah, so in the primary election, you are trying to convince the most ardent voters in your party. Because remember, Florida has what's known as a closed primary system, meaning you have to sign up with a party weeks in advance if you want to vote. So that means it is the people voting are like the most serious and civically minded and engaged voters. To convince those people, it's a far different game. Perhaps that's why State Rep Nixon won, because the most ardent voters are the most leftist when it comes to the Democrats in this example. Perhaps that's why Byron Donalds won, because the folks who are probably going to vote in the primary election most likely are some of the biggest supporters of President Trump, and he said vote for Congressman Donalds. The general election is a lot different. We talk about all those NPAs. The number's down a little bit, but it's still roughly a quarter of people in Florida have no party at all, and many of them would not have voted at all in the primary election. Those people are now in. You also have people who vote, only in the quote unquote big elections. Maybe they only go to the polls in November. They have kids, they have a job, they're doing their normal life, and maybe all they pick up is a couple ads here and there or what they see perhaps on their phone. And so now you have to diversify your campaign from trying to convince your most ardent voters to a general populace who may not even have heard of you before. And so it's just a way different strategy. And we're talking about millions more voters that were, and I'm knocking on wood, likely to see. You'd love to see a huge turnout. You want to see everybody engage. And so we could see closer to half the electorate, maybe more if we're really lucky, instead of the quarter we had last night.
Yeah. And Matt, we don't want to take up too much of your time. We appreciate you joining us so early, especially with the busyness of yesterday. So my final question for you is, are there any other key takeaways that viewers or voters need to walk away with?
First, thanks for having me. Happy, of course, to be here and happy to be on the air with you. I think the thing that I have thought about ruminating from last night to tonight is there is really a rejection, at least in some circles, of traditional politics. Yes, Congressman Donalds won, but there's no doubt he has adapted his campaign at times to be a little bit more of an outsider, to downplay the fact that he's a longtime politician. State Rep Nixon winning, I think, shows that people are disaffected. Democratic voters are disaffected with the party line because Alex Vindman would have been the safer choice. Military man, let's be real, older, white man, probably an easier sell, but they rejected that. Voters rejected that, and they said, no, let's go for the candidate we really want. So I think the biggest takeaway is that this is kind of a rejection of the regular status quo. And I think people have to take note of that heading into November, because we might see more upsets where we think, yeah, it's Florida. We think we know what's going to happen. I just think politicians need to be careful these days about accepting we're just doing this because we've always done it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much, Matt, for debriefing with us and recapping last night's election. We look forward to speaking to you again very soon. We'll be back
Good to be here.
in just
Thank
a
you,
bit.
guys.